You're listening to The Standard Angler, and my daddy's the host.
All right, special thanks to my sweetheart for the introduction. My name is Rick Crawford, and I am the host of the Sustainable Angler podcast and president of Emerger Strategies. So, hunters and anglers have a long history of fighting for access, protection, and the conservation of America's bountiful natural resources. And today, our fisheries face multiple threats from overfishing, nutrient and plastic pollution, habitat degradation, and climate change. In this episode, I interview T. Edward Nickens, who is a New York Times best-selling author and award-winning journalist that I am lucky to call a friend. We discuss Eddie's writing background, his new biography of Flip Pallet, the aforementioned environmental threats to our fisheries, the power of storytelling to affect change, and what you can do as an individual to protect what you love. Be sure to check out the website, www.thesustainableangler.com, to read blog posts, get caught up on previous episodes, and show your support for the show. The Sustainable Angler is available anywhere you listen to podcasts and is also airing Saturdays at 2 p.m. on Charleston's first and only community-supported radio station, Ohm Radio 96.3 FM. The Sustainable Angler is brought to you by Emerger Strategies and a New Earth Project, the sustainability initiative of Atlantic Packaging.
We set out with a New Earth Project to really start a movement.
It's a global coalition of people who are deeply concerned and want to accelerate the transition away from problematic packaging to more sustainable solutions.
Our entire value proposition was built on helping companies package things better. We were doing sustainability before sustainability was cool. We just called it packaging optimization. And packaging optimization really is about using less. And we built our whole business on that. You know, people send us their products, their goods, and we help them design packaging systems and solutions for the least possible cost, utilizing the least amount of material. Use less is always the right answer.
And that's what I see with companies like a New Earth Project is it's like, we're just trying to create solutions for big companies and small, that makes it easier for them, cheaper for them, whatever it is, and then has less impact. Not just trying to tell people you should have less impact and making the choice forced on them. Like, make it better for everybody, and it'll make it better for the whole world.
We see the problem, and we are with you.
Fishing taught me that everything in nature is interconnected. Just as a fiddler crab, a tailing redfish, and a marsh ecosystem are connected, so are our businesses and our planet. And we have a vision of businesses and the environment thriving together. Imagine a company that not only champions the sport of fishing, but also leads on climate action and conservation efforts. Products and packaging that are friendly to marine life and that degrade harmlessly back into the earth. It's not a dream, it's a strategy, and that's what we do at Emerger Strategies. We guide businesses on their sustainability journey by helping them measure and improve the sustainability performance of their operations, products, and packaging, all while boosting profits. Because when nature thrives, we all thrive. Together, we can make a difference for generations to come. Visit our website at emergerstrategies.com. Let's protect what we love together. All right, so thank you so much for joining me today on the Sustainable Angler. And today I have, which I'm going to stop myself right there, because how do you prefer to be addressed? Is it T. Edward Nickens or Eddie Nickens?
For you, Rick, I'll let you jump straight into Eddie. I won't make you tick off all the boxes before you get there. So Eddie works just dandy.
All right. Well, thank you. I feel honored and privileged. And um, for those of you who may not know, Eddie is a contributing editor to Garden and Gun and Ducks Unlimited. Is editor at large at Field and Stream. Is also the co-host with David DiBenedetto from Garden and Gun of the Wild South podcast. Now that is pretty loaded introduction. So, and I may not have even gotten that right. So let me just pass this over to you, Eddie. Can you tell us a little bit more about what you're working on today, and then also some of your background?
Yeah, I will let my dearly departed father-in-law introduce me. He always introduced me till the day he died as his gainfully unemployed son-in-law. So I have been gainfully unemployed as a freelance journalist, Rick, since 1986.
Wow.
Yeah, long ago. So I'm a freelance journalist for Garden Gun and DU and Field and Stream. I do a fair bit of work for Bonefish and Tarpon Trust. If you have listeners in North Carolina, I do write a monthly column for the magazine called Our State, which is just it's called Ramblin' Man is the name of the column, and they're quite kind to just let me ramble on about whatever I want to. Done book writing in the past. Actually working on a biography of Flip Pallett right now. I've been working on that for 2 or 3 years. Closing in on that. So yeah, it's a full plate, but it's a pretty good meal.
Well, I have spent some time doing my research for this interview, and I'm like, I think I want to be Eddie Nickens when I grow up, based on the writing and places you've been able to travel, and now you're just adding more columns in the cool column because now you're writing a biography about Flip Pallett. So now it's official. I just want to be Eddie Nickens when I grow up.
I've got some time free, Rick. People always they want to be me until they understand that being me is basically writing term papers for a living. So that takes a little bit of the shine off of it. But look, I'm not going to complain. It's been quite a good ride.
Oh, well, that's awesome. And my wife Jody is from Tarboro.
Oh yeah.
And her brother Matt Godwin and his family, they live in Moorhead. So our state is always on a coffee table somewhere. So I've over the years read some of your ramblings in there too.
Yeah.
So let me ask you, kind of looking back, right? So I mean, since 1986, what initially kind of drew you into writing, and in particular with the focus on hunting, fishing, outdoors?
Yeah. Part of it was a complete and proven inability to provide any other service that people would give me money for. But I knew I could write. I always loved to write. And I knew I was horrible and terrible and terrified of math. So my dreams of being a wildlife biologist were shot early in my career at UNC Chapel Hill when I failed algebra 3 twice. So that was the end of the science thing. But by then I knew the writing, which I really enjoyed. Graduated. But what does being a writer mean? That took a while to figure out. But the hunting and fishing aspect, it's funny, when I first started freelancing, part of my business plan, as it were, was to not be an outdoor writer. Back then, 30 years ago, whether it was deserved or not, outdoor writers had a little bit of a reputation. They weren't the literary sort often, and I had aspirations of being more of a literary nonfiction writer. So most of my early work from Men's Journal and National Geographic Adventure, one of my largest clients for a long time was Smithsonian Magazine. I did no hunting. I did not want to write about my passions, partly because I didn't want my hobbies to be my job, but because I had, this other idea of what maybe writing could be or should be or would be. But through contacts and just the way the world works, when Field and Stream came calling, it was kind of hard to tell him, no, I don't think I want to write for you. So my stated career goal of not being known as an outdoors journalist was a total failure. But it has some pretty good upsides to it.
Well, it had to have been, I don't know. I guess I'll ask, like, it's like, I look back at things that it's like, when you look back at it, it seemed serendipitous, like, or it was like, oh, right, like these things happened and then that led to this. And so, obviously younger in my career, but there's just a few things that have happened along the way that I'm like, oh, well, yeah, that kind of makes sense. Is there anything like that you can recall on the writing side where it was like you connected these dots and then it's like, and then here you are today, right? And
yeah, I guess looking back, you see the footprints down the beach a little more clearly. I'll have to say, you mentioned David DeBenedetta at Garden Gun before. I have worked with David since the 90s. He was my first editor at Men's Journal when he was, and I'm, I don't know, 12 years older than David, but he was just out of college and had his first job, and Men's Journal was one of my first kind of big gigs, and he was my editor there. And then, he moved from Men's Journal to Field and Stream, and then to Saltwater Sportsman, and then to Garden Gun. So, I don't like to admit this to too many people, but I've kind of followed him around like a little puppy dog. It's the 90s, but and the hunting and fishing were just, it was just kind of obvious, it's what I love to write about. And I love to write about hunting and fishing and the outdoors and wilderness travel in a way that maybe not a lot of people write about. I like the essay form. I like, I would tell people I write about story. It's just fishing and hunting is the lens I use particularly to turn to a story, if that makes sense. My byline, T. Edward Nickens, came about because of this sort of conflict. The first time, if you look back, like my first bylines for Audubon and for National Geographic Adventure and for Men's Journal was Eddie Nickens. And I got my first Smithsonian Magazine assignment. And my
Which
wife,
is a big
Julie,
deal, right? Which is a huge deal, right?
It was a huge deal. And my wife, who's in the magazine business and has always been a great advisor, she's like, "You really want to be in Smithsonian Magazine as Eddie?" I'm like, "Wait, that's my name, But she convinced me to go with T. Edward Nickens. And
so there it is.
A little bit of a logo, it was a brilliant move. She's a great marketer, so good on her for that.
Oh, that's awesome. Well, I have one thing that we haven't mentioned, which I have picked up and was honestly hard to put down, is The Last Wild Road, and that I love this the essay format, and it's like going along for the ride, and anyway. I'm doting at this point, but I can't tell you how much I've enjoyed what I've read thus far of The Last Wild Road. It is excellent read.
Yeah, that's kind of you. That was a fun. It was a fun book to put together. Colin Kearns, the head editor at Field and Stream, and I worked on that. Worked on that hard to kind of go through. At the time, I think it was 18 years of bylines for Field and Stream, which in Field and Stream, when it was 10, 12 issues a year was by far my biggest client. I had a column in there for many, many years and big features all over the place. And to be able to kind of pull out, what we thought were the best of the essays and also sort of the adventure stories that had kind of a cultural angle to them was a lot of fun. And it's been a great thing. Glad you've enjoyed it. I think folks have enjoyed it. Yeah, do another one of these days.
Yeah, well, I hope so. This is yeah. So anyway, it's a wonderful read, but I also want to talk about which I read sometime last couple of days. Which I think it may be your latest piece in Garden and Gun, but about Tarpon, about All That Is Sacred, just a little write up on that movie. Were some of those guys your heroes at all in terms of writers, the Jim Harrisons and the Thomas McGuanes of the world? Did those guys inspire you when you were that younger writer who was like looking to write, or did you know who those guys were? Did you get introduced them through?
Yeah, knowing that genre of that type of literary nonfiction, the McGuanes, the Jim Harrisons, that was definitely a later influence for me. I would say the John McPhees of the world were my primary writing influence when I was kind of trying to hone the craft. And John, for me, I have probably 8 of his collections. John McPhee is still the finest nonfiction writer I think we've ever created. And so he was definitely an influence, but definitely later on. I love Jim Harrison. I've got a little sheet of paper. I don't even need to find it, but I'm going to make sure I can find it on my desk right here. It's right up under my monitor. It's a quote from Jim Harrison. I use it all the time. It's from a book that not many people, well, not I don't want to say not many people. A lot of people don't know this book, The Beast That God Forgot to Invent. Have you ever heard of that one from Jim Harrison? Oh, man, it's awesome. But in it, he writes, the danger of civilization, of course, is that you will piss away your life on nonsense. And I have that on my computer monitor, and many a days I feel like I'm pissing in my pants on nonsense, right? And I have to remind myself that there's a different path, I guess, is the way to look at it.
Well, that's super interesting. And I know that which we can get to, but you're also doing the Wild South podcast, which I've had an opportunity to listen to a few episodes, and that has also been really enjoyable. Y'all have you and David have a great rapport and have got some excellent guests on there, and so yeah. So anyway, I'm just, needless to say, I'm thrilled to have you on the Sustainable Angler. As I mentioned earlier, there are tens of people that listen to this, so I appreciate your willingness to come on.
Yeah, back at you, Rick. You and I met because you won a Conservation Champion Award through Garden and Gun. That's how I came to know of your work. So you need to be highlighted and underscored as well. I think what the Emergent Strategies does is incredibly forward thinking. Maybe there's days in your business when you wish maybe you weren't quite as futuristic.
Understatement.
But yeah, but when I think about what I'm intrigued with in the environmental realm and where I think solutions lie, you're right in the crosshairs of it. And I applaud what y'all do, and I hope y'all can stick it out until sort of the ballistics of society catch up to what you guys are aiming at.
Well, I sincerely appreciate you saying that. But let's talk about that. Let's get into some of the environmental. I mean, what are some of the, we're typically I'm referring to fishing, right? The sustainable angler, but I mean, what are some of the environmental threats to our fisheries or to where you live, or just what is important to you that you think needs to be addressed?
It's a great question. It's a good time for that question. I find myself in a bit of a transition period. I just stepped off, or because of the bylaws of the group, I had to step off of the board of directors of Backcountry Hunters and Anglers. So I was on the board for 9 years and served the last 3 as an officer of the executive committee. So I've been deeply immersed, to say the least, in public lands and public waters issues, which is definitely, I mean, I grew up hunting and fishing on public lands. I mean, and still do, but there was a time where that was it. There was a long time when that was it. And so the public lands and public waters is still a passion. But in the last 6 months, I've looked out to see where I think the real areas of interest is. I've just kind of looked out to see, that was BHA was on a North American scale, which I really appreciated working on. Now I'm thinking, what's a little closer to home. I have this love of saltwater fly fishing. And like many of us who love saltwater fly fishing, the love does not equal the checkbook resources that is often required to act on that love. It's an expensive pastime. But I've got a place in Morehead City, down near Harkers Island, Cape Lookout. I'm down there a bunch. So yeah, that saltwater environment is something that's definitely closer to home because I'm on the water a lot. My work with BTT, with Bonefish and Tarpon Trust, has been incredibly rewarding personally, in terms of seeing an environment that is imperiled and seeing people who honestly, the work is unbelievable. What BTT and the FIU scientists and some of the folks have been able to do there. So that's definitely going on, and I'm a duck hunter from the word go, and I'm a big believer in, when you're looking at landscape scale conservation, it's just such a ginormous lift that an organization like DU, and I'm not trying to pat all my contractors on the back, but one of the reasons that I work for them is I believe in their mission, and these are big problems with, giant solutions. And so it's inspiring to see what they're doing. But to focus in, Rick, I guess, I am particularly interested in that saltwater environment. Definitely following the American Saltwater Guides Association closely. I've spent a lot of time with Flip of late, so I'm in that world. And I see it in Morehead City. I see it in the Crystal Coast of North Carolina. The concerns over overfishing, the concerns over state management of fisheries, marine fisheries resources, which in North Carolina are in peril. I'm in a place where every day that I put my boat in and run out of Morehead and past Radio Island and out Beaufort Inlet, I'm passing the Morehead City port, which is typically chock-a-block with wind turbine blades and everything else that they're shipping offshore to develop these resources. And so the change is, you don't have to look for it. It comes and grabs you by the throat. So I would have to say the things that concern me, I'm starting to, like I said, I've taken about 6 months to kind of think about where I'd like to work in terms of activism and advocacy. And I think that's the realm I'm kind of zeroing in on, if that answers your question.
Yeah. I mean, it's, when it's when you're living in it and you see it, there's things that I see in Charleston that maybe other places don't see, but I mean, it's, for us, it's it's flooding on a sunny day, and
Yeah.
and it's just like my daughter used to go to school downtown. I used to get rerouted on a sunny day because the street was flooded, and it was like
Yeah.
something's so, so, something isn't right.
Yeah.
This didn't used to happen.
And it's in your face. I mean, this year I love to fish for bonita on fly. I love to fly fish. I'm not a fly fishing snob. It's just my weapon of choice. But I do love to chase bonita. And this year, and I mean, I still work full time, so I have to pick my days. I'm not down there a lot, but I never saw a busting school of bonita for the first time in years and years and years. There was such a concentrated effort on the bonita fishery this year. It was astonishing. We've never seen that many people fish. And it's because everybody was posting about it. And they're on the wrecks, they're on the reefs, they're only 3 miles offshore. And everybody's, look, I make a living from our resources as a writer of natural history and outdoor sports. So I'm not gonna, cast too much shade, but the posts and bonita are unregulated. So the posts of, 2 guys and a charter captain with 38 bonita laying on the dock. We've never seen that before. And it's not just the guys, just the pressure on that fishery on these reefs was so heavy. I mean, I'd run out to the reef and I was like, I mean, there'd be 40 or 50 boats. And so the fish, I think, are just, man, we're not coming to the top of all that crap, So I never saw busting school bonita. So you're right. We're starting to get it in real time. We're seeing climate change impacts in real time. And this is not a futuristic discussion anymore. And I think I'm becoming, and you know what, on the other side of the state with trout resources, this is not a future thing. This is not a Western thing when we're looking at the losses that we could have in brook trout habitat in North Carolina and the Southern Appalachians due to climate change. I think people are realizing this is everywhere, everybody right now. And hopefully that leads to some soul searching about what we can do individually to affect it. Because I do think there are things we can do, and some of them are totemic and symbolic, more so than moving the needle. But you know what, Dan? We need symbol and totem in the hunting and fishing world, and our history is providing that at times of great conservation distress.
Yeah, I agree. I think that I think that it's happening very quickly, and as you said, in real time. And I think it's also an all hands on deck situation, and it's like, yeah, you need it all, every bit of it. If we really want to have a fighting chance to save a lot of our fisheries and a lot of our hunting. I mean, you see it, hoot owl restrictions in Montana. You see it, there's all sorts of examples, rising sea levels in Charleston, everything you just mentioned. Like, it's happening. It's happening. And it's not, I think the other thing too, that I think a lot of people get wrong is everyone wants to blame. And it's just like, look, it just is what it is. We didn't start burning fossil fuels with the intent of causing this. It's just something we learned along the way. And it's just going, okay, well, now we're going to need to make some adjustments. We're going to need to see what we need to do to make sure everyone can still eat and live a good life. But we've really got to start taking this seriously, because I just, like I said, I mean, it's just, when I get rerouted driving my daughter to school, it's just like, man, like
It's right here. Yeah.
this is happening today.
Yeah. It's a challenge because if you talk about pointing fingers, now the fingers, there's just so many fingers to point,
Right.
and it is everything, I mean, it is non-point pollution runoff from ag fields and municipalities. It is failing sewage treatment plants. It is rising water. It's all of this. And so it's very, very easy for any particular silo to say, well, don't start with me, go over there to them. But right. I think people are just getting fed up. You see what's happening in Florida with those groups down there that have been led by sporting advocates. You see what's happening in the saltwater sphere with the American Saltwater Guides Association, and it's inspiring to see it. But I think it's important to realize that this is history repeating itself, because in the 30s and 40s, when this entire conservation movement was birthed, it was hunters and anglers that were leading the way then. And I'm proud to be in a generation that I think is having a second wave of that. We'll see how successful it is.
Well, I think myself and the other 9 people that listen to my podcast are gonna fully support this, and I sincerely appreciate you using your influence to bring attention to this important issue, because it's happening whether people want to believe it or not. And so it's just kind of like, let's stop with all that and let's just figure out how we're going to fix it. And and that's what I think everyone needs to focus on is, all right, what are we going to do about it? And so I love that y'all are and that this is becoming something that's being talked about more.
And I'll give a lot of props to Garden Gun on this, Rick, if you don't mind. I do think that it's it's an entity. You can't even call it a magazine anymore. David and I joke about the days when a magazine editor edited a magazine. And of course now a magazine is a multimedia company, but to see that group or that organization has synthesized a love of seemingly disparate things, from the environment to natural resources to southern foodways, which ties back into the natural resources, and is using. I mean, it's not a soapbox, but it's a place where we can give voice and amplify voice to these issues that so many of us are really struggling with. And so the Wild South podcast, I mean, that's a lot of fun. We have some pretty cool guests on there, but we're kind of struggling with all this as well. I mean, what can I do? I'm on my boat. What can I do? I mean, what decisions can I make? What changes can I make? But it all sort of comes back to being willing to ask yourself those questions and be willing to act on the answers.
And I think that's a big part of it, right? It's just asking the questions like, well, what am I doing? I don't know. It's the same thing when not to bring this to me, but just to give an example, it's like when I work with a business, they've never asked themselves these questions.
Right.
And so you're just like, hey, look, like, well, we're just trying to figure out what we can do about it. And as it turns out, if you do some of these things, we can reduce our footprint, and we can also reduce your cost, and we can also enhance your reputation and do all these things that are good for your business. But as an individual angler, I think everyone's got to make that decision for themselves. But it is so important to have a Garden Gun out there, at least saying, hey, we're going to be talking about it. We're going to show you some things and how important that is.
Yeah.
It's one thing to have like small little groups or people talking about this stuff, but to have an actual respected and loved magazine in the Southeast talking about it is a big deal.
Yeah, I think you're right, Rick. I mean, there's nothing more important in American society today, we can all agree, than the health of the print magazine industry. So thank you for thank you.
This is true. This is true. Well, okay, so let me ask you this. So we're kind of, since we're on you're a storyteller, and a writer. And what I'm curious to know, what your thought is on what role does storytelling play in this, whether it's conservation or climate or whatever it is, these environmental issues, right, to hunting and fishing. What role does storytelling play?
Oh, man, that is a really good question. I mean, I do think that as print journalism has eroded, we may lose the ability to recognize the power of the individual, because the individual stories are no longer being told the way they used to be. And I've used this metaphor or way of explaining this in the past, but when you think of what magazines were 10, 15, 20 years ago and how robust that industry was, right? You had all these magazines telling all of these stories. And in order to tell those stories, they had people like me. They had freelance writers, hundreds and hundreds and thousands of, it was an industry because there was a way to make a living. And I've described it, Rick, as freelance writers were like a guerrilla army that would infiltrate every corner of American society, turning over rocks, peeking in windows in the middle of the night, trying to find stories, because we were all in competition with each other, because the top magazines, there's only going to be 40 stories a month, 400 stories a year told, and we all wanted the best ones. And so we were uncovering these incredible stories of everyday people doing extraordinary things. And I don't think that's done now. And I think that I'm not knocking digital media, because it has a wonderful role to play, but it's typically more populated by the well-known and the celebrities and their take on things. And I do think we're losing the voices of the every man and every woman that were so inspiring. I mean, we can look at what some country music star is doing, and it's great, but I mean, we're not ever gonna, but we hear about, what some welder in Omaha is doing with his life and with his passions and with his advocacy and with his unwillingness to let things go in his sphere of influence. And I think we do lose that. So I think that erosion of that aspect of storytelling makes it tougher. Now in the digital world, there's plenty to be inspired of by there. There's actually a bit of we'll call it a renaissance. Hope it's a renaissance. Fingers crossed renaissance in print magazines, especially in the outdoor realm. New York Times did a big piece last month on the rise of these niche outdoor magazines. So I mean, print is not dead. Storytelling is not dead. It is a different way, and I think it plucks at a different heartstring than it used to. Because I do think the stories that used to be told and the way that they were told maybe help generate action a little more, which is not to say that signing an online petition isn't action and isn't useful, but it's too easy to click the button and go, I've done my part, when I'm not sure I would agree with that.
Well, and it's true too, when it's like, okay, well, and I'm guilty of it, right? It's like, okay, this is an organization that I trust. I do my little bit of research. I read the article and I say, okay, I'm going to submit it. And I pat myself on the back because I feel like I did something for that day. But ask me, a week later to dive into some of those specifics. Well, I can't do that. But if I have a story about it and I'm like, well, backcountry hunters and anglers, it's like, hey, this guy was and I can tell the story about how this came about and what drew the attention to it was a love for public lands and public access and public water, then I'm able to become, for lack of a better word, an evangelist of some sort for an organization or for a cause, to be able to say, look, this is really important. I didn't realize this until I heard this guy's story or this girl's story, and like it moved me, and so it moved me to action versus, okay, you hit click, you did it, we solved the problem.
Yeah, and I don't want to. Again, I'm no Luddite. I mean, the digital way, the new way of marketing story is super helpful, and it's able to engage people on a much broader scale. I mean, you look at in your world, Rick, you look at the role of ambassadors, brand ambassadors. I mean, that role has changed enormously in just a few years to become something we've never even seen before in our industries. These people who are able to affect change the way that their positions and perspectives are magnified across social media and across marketing, and the brands that are supporting this. There's there's so much positive going on. I mean, corporately, there's more positive going on, I'd say, than ever before by far. And it's so cool to see these brand ambassadors and how they're able to pull it off. And I mean, I know a number of these folks, and man, they're not just signing their name on some contract and getting a kickback. I mean, they are mentally, physically, emotionally invested in helping these brands amplify the message. That's super cool. I mean, I think that's a real positive thing. TikTok, nah, I don't know. But these brand ambassadors, man, 2 thumbs up on some of that.
Yeah, and I mean, it's, to me, when you say that, I think of Hillary Hutchison and Kyle Schaefer and some of these people who are they're influencing policy. They are they are doing things that are. This isn't just some paid influencer deal. Like this, this is, they are the real deal. They're making positive change, and that's the kind of, I think, energy that everyone needs and needs to. It's like, what can you do? It's like, well, you can latch onto that energy and ride that wave, because that's what we need.
So coming around to sort of that whole, the new way of doing things and new media. I mean, I'd put that in that bucket. To me, that's a super, super positive, very positive thing.
Well, what about, so on the note of positive and thinking in that light, despite of some of the challenges that our fisheries may face, what are some other things that give you hope, or that or maybe there's nonprofits that are doing great work, or just what keeps you from not wanting to give up?
Well, I do live in a pretty nice state. That helps. And the coast of North Carolina is a fabulous place. All the more fabulous Monday through Friday. I'll tell you what gives me a lot of hope is seeing sort of the evolution of what we used to call citizen science. When I see hunters and anglers that are not only using their voice, but using their time and their smarts to answer some of these questions. I'm a part of the false albacore tagging crew that the American Saltwater Guides Association has. I suspect if you were to ask them, they would tell you I'm probably the worst angler that ever signed up for that. And also the duck DNA project that the University of Texas at El Paso and DU is doing together. I'm a volunteer for that, which anybody can be. You know, I'm snipping off the tongues of 3 mallards this year to kind of help work out some of this genetics. And just the way that hunters and anglers are intersecting with policy is exciting. And there's growing pains with that, and that's okay. But to see people show up and speak up is very inspiring, and that's what's going to change things. You know, as legislators understand, as legislators understand that these are powerful economic arguments. You know, you may not give a rat's ass about a beaver dam at sunrise, but you will care about the economic impacts of the guiding community and the lodging community and all of that. When you look at I'm going to gargle up these numbers. I've told everybody before how terrible I am at math, but BTT or FIU, they did a study of the economic value of a bonefish to the Florida Keys. One bonefish. You'll have to fact check me. I think it's $70,000 per fish. That's the return of one bonefish to the local economy from guide fees, lot, you know, $70,000. And so it's a shame that we have to turn it into a financial argument when it's really a moral argument to just do the right thing. But, you know, we've got a group of hunters and anglers now across the board, freshwater, saltwater, hunt, fish, men, women, you name it, they're taking these arguments to their legislators and saying, now will you do something? And so I applaud those groups that are doing that, and the people who are taking the time to do that.
Yeah, and to provide a super recent example, and I can't remember the name of the park, but in Florida they were trying to put a golf course on some state park, and people went and raised hell, and the golf, whoever was behind the golf deal, backed out because they're all right. People are pissed.
Literally just yesterday.
Yeah.
The Jonathan Dickinson Park in Florida, 3 golf course going in, people went ballistic. You look at the group Mang Gear. Do you know Mang Gear?
I do.
I mean, those 2 brothers, look at what they've been able to do with t-shirts, and they are having a global impact on mangrove restoration because they were young and hip and smart, but mostly they were just committed. You know what they weren't going to do? They weren't going to piss their life away on nonsense. And I will have to say, I feel like I need to build social media up here. I feel like I smacked it down a little bit, but I will have to say that's one thing social media has been able to do is it's allowed people to use it's given people a greater choice than we've ever had to either piss away your life on nonsense or not. And for every way that the digital world wants to suck the vitality out of your lifestyle, it offers other ways to amplify your message and to connect with other people who feel the way you do. I mean, I can't say enough about those Mang guys. They've done a fabulous job.
They really have, and I mean, and the impact of the amount of mangroves that they're planting, and then partnering with organizations like BTT and I mean, I think we're gonna. I think a positive from everything that's happening. Like anytime there's a big problem, I don't see problems, I see opportunities. And it's like this is, it's climate change. Like, yes, this is a big problem. It's also the biggest economic opportunity of the 21st century.
Yeah.
And it's like it's also the opportunity for us to really reconnect and understand the value of nature and understand the value of a mangrove and what that does in this particular example. And I think that is going to be I think hopefully, nature is going to swoop in and we'll understand the value and we'll say, yeah, we really, we are part of this. We are not separate from this, and we got to take care of it, or it will stop taking care of us.
No doubt. No doubt.
All right. Well, we've covered a lot of ground. We've covered background, writing, environmental threats to fisheries, talked about what gives us hope, but we really haven't done a ton of fishing. We haven't really talked a ton of fishing, which I would be remiss on the Sustainable Angler podcast if we didn't talk a little fishing. So you're spending time Raleigh, Moorhead, that's where you live, area.
Yep.
What are some of you mentioned it, but maybe there's some other species. What are you loving to chase with the fly rod these days?
Yeah, I do. I do love. I'm getting ready to roll into the whole false albacore season down here. I love Spanish mackerel on a fly, and I love false albacore on a fly. I tell people, I am the world's worst saltwater angler. I can catch false albacore and I can catch Spanish mackerel, but if you told me to go out there with a spinning rod and catch a trout for dinner in the marsh, I might starve to death. But I still love to do it. I do love to fish in Florida. I've got the opportunity here. I've been spending time down in the Everglades, mostly with some good guide friends and with some of the projects I'm working on. I do get a chance to go down there. I'll be back down there for a week and a half in October and going to the Bahamas on a lodge trip in October. November through January, Ducks Unlimited pretty much owns my calendar. So not a whole lot of fishing going on then, but that's okay. So now we're into February. March, I give to my wife to reacquaint myself to her after a hunting season on the road. And yeah. Hey, April's shadow running in the Roanoke. So yay, it all starts over again.
I love it. Living your life by the seasons and what's happening. Well, that's great. How often are you making it down to Charleston?
I come down typically during the Seawee event. I do a event for Garden Gun there. I'm down there 2 or 3 times a year, sometimes more, just for fun. But the nature of my work, Rick, is, it can be, I'm going to leave for Wyoming in 2 weeks to sharp-tailed grouse hunt for a story for Field and Stream, and for DU, I'll be in Louisiana and Arkansas and Colorado and Maine. So yeah, that's those are the highlights. My Instagram life does not suck. I will say that, but the rest of, I love to write. I love to write. I love to sit here for days, literally 8-9 hours a day and write. That sounds horrible to so many people, which is good. I don't have as much competition, but I'm very fortunate. I'm very fortunate to have found myself in a position of working for magazines that still support a writer who can take 4 hours to construct a paragraph, and sometimes it takes that. And I'm very, very lucky to be working for who I work for. I recognize that every day.
Well, we are the beneficiaries, so we appreciate your writing. I know I certainly do. Where can folks pick up a copy of The Last Wild Road, or listen to an episode of The Wild South, or any of your other good work. Where can people get more info and find more content?
Yeah. Well, I hope that The Last Wild Road hasn't yet made it to the bargain bin at Costco. So don't go looking for it there, at least for a few more years. But The Last Wild Road is, the easiest way is to order it through Amazon. All the books, I wrote 5 other books for Field and Stream. They're all available on Amazon. The Last Wild Road is available. We got all 6 of the first season episodes posted on the Wild South podcast homepage, which lives on the Garden and Gun website. And so let me see if I can remember them. Golly, hope I don't leave anybody out. First one was Flip Palette.
Yeah.
Hillary was on one. Hillary was unbelievably inspiring. I was hoping that you were going to ask me to name the one person right now that I'm most inspired by, and it is Hillary Hutchison.
All right. Well, now I just asked it, so you asked it.
Yeah. I mean, Hillary is. I mean, that's the pot, and David felt the same way. I mean, the producer of the podcast, who does not hunt or fare anything. We were all just. And I've known Hillary for a long time. We served on the BHA board of directors. I fished with her and Evan in Mexico this year with my son. But for her to articulate her journey she's something. So she was on there.
Yeah, you would be hard pressed to find one person who has made more of a positive impact
Yeah.
In any industry than Hillary.
Yeah. She'll make you hang your head in shame. But let's see. We had Tom Rosenbauer on there. We had Nathan Hitt, who is the brook trout ecologist for USGS. Man, I hesitate to ask him. Alvin Dedeaux was on there. David and I did an episode talking about raising kids in the outdoors, which was a lot of fun. Golly, I know I'm missing somebody. They'll let me know, I'm sure. Yeah, and then otherwise, I'm in Garden and Gun and Field and Stream and DU every issue and BTT Journal when I get lucky, and
not to mention a Flip Palette biography.
Oh God, not to mention the Flip Palette the Flip Palette biography. Which has been one of the most amazing experiences, as you can imagine, traveling with Flip and getting to know. I mean, it's a biography. I mean, I've interviewed so far, I don't know, 60 or 70 people.
Wow.
And gone all the way through the Ellis Island records of his grandfather coming over from Russia and spending a lot of time with Flip. And, we talk about these issues a lot, Rick, about what does it mean to love a place that's struggling? What does it mean to understand the diminishing returns of the future without being, suffocated by some of those realities? I mean, these are your listeners. These are things we struggle with. These are not just pie in the sky philosophical questions. I mean, how do you freaking love the Everglades, knowing what's coming down the road? And you can say that for Morehead City. You can say that for anywhere. And so it's been wonderful to sit with Flip, who was as clear-eyed as anyone over what's happened to South Florida, and try to tease out from his life ways that will inform us to fight the fight and to enjoy the fight, to enjoy the time we have. Nobody wants to just spend the rest of their life pissed off and angry and mad.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, well, and I think that it is these problems are very real and they're very big and it can make you feel very small. But I have to believe that we're gonna, because what other choice do you have? but
Yeah.
but
Well, it all comes down to one thing, Rick, and what one question did I tell you to ask me at the beginning of this podcast?
oh, the orange peel conundrum.
The orange peel conundrum, trademarked and registered as my personal philosophy.
Yeah, okay, all right. Yeah,
The
let's hear
orange
this.
peel conundrum. It solves all, Rick. On my boat, you don't throw anything out of the boat. You don't throw an orange peel, a banana peel, a pistachio hull, an apple core, a piece of bread crust, much less litter. You just don't, you just don't. And I wrote about this for Garden Gun in a column we started called The Southern Conundrum.
Okay.
And it was the orange peel conundrum. And boy, did I hear it from all quarters. I heard it from names I will not name, but that name is listening about how this is ridiculous, that there is nothing wrong with chunking over a soggy sandwich. It's going to break down. It's food for the fishes, blah, 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 blah. And Hillary and I have talked about this, and she was a little aghast at my, the Nickens we've been called a judgy people, a preachy people. But man, I'm like, just don't, because if you do, well, for two things, I don't want to pull up to some marsh beach and see your freaking banana peel there. I don't care if the crabs are going to eat it tomorrow. It's sitting there right there in front of me. I don't want to do that to anybody else. And it's a slippery slope, banana peel, whatever. Piece of fishing line,
Yeah.
So the orange peel conundrum is just do what you can.
Yeah.
Don't worry about what you can't do. And I'm going to give my daughter Marky a lot of credit for this. I gave her a lot of credit for this on the Garden Gun podcast. I mean, she's sort of the ecological swami of our family. She's the spiritual. She holds the center. And she's not as preachy as I am, but she lets us know, what can you do? So you don't throw your orange peel. Just put it back in the freaking bag. Don't throw your chicken bone off my boat,
Yeah.
And here he's like, well, I don't know if I'd say anything to anybody. I said, well, I'll say something to him, So anyway, but I really did I heard a lot about the orange peel conundrum. But the bigger question, Rick, is what can you do? I mean, my wife and I are not crazy. I don't want to make anybody feel bad. We're really trying to minimize our single-use plastic footprint.
Yeah.
And it's hard for me not to be preachy about it with our friends, but I've not been very preachy about it. But instead of Ziplocs, we bought one of those, $95. You get this little plumpy thing, and you get 3 or 4 glass things, and you get the Ziplocky things, and you're done.
Yeah.
Carry a fork and a straw in your truck, and you're done. Carry a whatever water bottle and never buy another, and you're done. And you could I've started carrying, like my little Yeti tumbler into the bars every now and then, and those people get a little pissed off sometimes. And maybe it's a thing of maybe that's a little too far, but you know what? Sometimes they don't get pissed off and they appreciate it. So what can you do? And and the thing is once you start doing a little bit of that, once you stop throwing the orange peel off your boat, and once you stop using all those Ziplocs, then you get in this mindset, right?
Yeah.
Well, that wasn't hard. What else can I do? What else can I do? What else can I do? And man, it'll steamroll. It'll make it. And does it make it? Yes. It makes a difference. If you don't think it doesn't make a difference, you're just wrong. It does make a
So I completely agree, right? And it starts with the individual, right? Because that's the only thing you can control is what you do. And so
No. I can control what people on my boat do, Rick Crawford.
well, unless you're the captain. But I think that is the best advice that you could give, is to say it starts with you. It starts with you, the individual angler, and you can make some better decisions. And once you start to peel away the orange peel, pun intended. But once you start to sort of peel the stuff away, you go, that wasn't that big of a deal. Like, it saved me a little bit of money too. Who cares? Like,
that's what's been surprising with Julie, my wife, and I, is now it's like, I mean, really, we don't want to be, these people that'll just, I promise to your readers, I am a fun person. I really am. But it's been fun to kind of look around and go, well, what next? That was, like you said, we just saved, whatever. Like the the Swedish or Danish dish towels,
Yep.
Man, we used to go through paper towels like freaking water. We had two kids and 2 dogs and a cat, and I'm a mess. And man, you buy a dozen of those things, I bet we don't go through a roll of paper towels in a month. And we save money. I mean, it's just, look, this is your business. I'm preaching to the choir here, but on an individual basis, man, you start doing a few of these little things, and all of a sudden it's like, wow, I can make a go of this.
Yeah. Well, I think that's an excellent message to wrap with, which is everybody that I talk to says, what can I do? What can I do? What can I do? You know what you can do? You can do something. It starts with you.
Whatever you can.
Yeah.
And it's not a zero-sum game. And I guess that's the other point that I like to make. I'm not saying I'm never going to use a plastic fork for the rest of my life.
Yeah.
Or I'm never going to buy boxes of Ziplocs, but what can you do? Once you pick the low-hanging fruit, then the next level, guess what that is? That's the low-hanging fruit.
Yeah.
And so you just kind of move up the chain. So yeah, it's kind of fun. I think it's kind of fun. Some people still want to throw their chicken bones off my boat
and pull peanuts. All right, Eddie. Well, I want to be cognizant of your time, but I just want to sincerely thank you for taking some time to talk with me, and thank you for everything that you do and that you're doing to create awareness about some really important topics, and just as a fanboy, just really enjoy your writing. So thank you.
Well, I appreciate it. I've been super lucky, man. There's no doubt about it. I really do still wake up many days and just go, how in the world did I get here? Still wake up many days and go, how in the world am I going to pay my credit card bill? But the other days are a little more new. So.
We're living parallel lives.
Sounds good. Absolutely enjoyed it. And Godspeed to your work too, Rick. You're out there swinging the sword for us on a whole nother level. There's a lot of us who recognize it and appreciate it.
Thank you for saying that. All right. Special thanks to Eddie for everything he's doing to protect the fisheries that he loves. And if you're enjoying the podcast, an absolutely free way to support the show is by leaving a 5-star rating and review on Apple Podcast or Spotify. It's a chance to tell me what you love about the show, and it helps others discover it too. I'll also mention that there is some The Sustainable Angler merchandise available on the website that have been thoughtfully procured and packaged with zero plastic, organic cotton, and cotton that is made 100% from dirt to shirt in North Carolina. Thanks for listening, and stay tuned for new episodes dropping every month.